So we're recording this. This is our Empathy Cafe to talk about the what's going on over in NVCa and B and T. So we're going to just be doing an empathic listening here between the three of us. Not a lot of people seem to be interested in the topic. So we're going to use we can do like 6-minute turns, I guess, since we're a small group. And let me bring up the stopwatch. And for how to do the empathy circle, you can go to empathyycircle.com, and there's instructions how to do it. One person will speak, they'll select who they're going to speak to. That person will reflect back their understanding of what was said to the satisfaction of the speaker. Everyone here knows how to do it. So I just got the stopwatch set up and we're ready to go. Anyone want to start?
Yeah, I would love to start.
Okay.
I'll speak to you, Nellie.
Okay.
So, I'm thinking about something that came up in this circle last week by Richard. Richard said something like, there have been very few people who have been excluded from those groups. And if that's true, I'll assume it's true, it makes it easier to have a process with those people. I have seen used in my case of being excluded from those groups, and I was just reading about Adrian, that the protective use of force is the term that is named as the reason. And the thing about the protective use of force is it can't be used as a justification for permanent force. It's the idea is that there is a critical moment where protection, where you use force at that moment, and then you immediately re-examine, right? It's like a police officer arresting an individual. You put handcuffs on them. You don't leave the handcuffs on them for the rest of their life. You create a situation where force is not necessary. And if you use protective use of force indefinitely, it invalidates the original, maybe it doesn't invalidate the original reason, but it gets harder and harder to justify. So I have a lot I could say about the specific NVC groups, A, B, etc., E, T. But yeah, I think it underlines a larger issue around how we deal with differences. I think structurally, it's important to talk about the people who have the structural power. There is a community of people who are what's called certified trainers, and they have a list that they use to communicate. And I think it's a little odd the way that list gets used. I don't know, because I'm not on the list, but I know it was used to talk about me, because when I was more in that community, my posts in NVCa were shared on that list. And that, when I found out about that, when that was sent to me, I found that to be a real breach in trust and my personal privacy that has never been addressed by any of the certified trainers. People were discussing calling the police on me. Specifically, Carrie Buck, who's a trainer in the UK, was talking to Dominic Barter and Mickey about calling the police on me. And protective use of force was named as a justification. Well, Carrie has never had a conversation with me about it and has said she's too busy. For 2.5 years, she's too busy to have a conversation with me about the fact that she talked and slandered my name as being someone possibly to call the police on. They never, as far as I know, they did not call the police on me. But it becomes, as years and years go on, it becomes harder to believe this idea that they don't have time to talk to me. It's
you want to get a reflection on any of that?
Or yes, I do. Thank you. I'm emotional about this. So Nellie, would you?
I've heard that you're wondering, you started off with saying that there were just few people who were excluded, and that this makes it, or something that it makes it simpler to look at the process of the exclusion. And you know the process of which happened for yourself, and also you have talked with Adrian?
I know. I think it gets harder to justify refusing to have a process with a so-called problematic person when there's only 2 or 3 people who have been excluded from a group of 10,000. It becomes harder to justify not having some kind of process because it's only 1 or 2 people.
Yeah. So yeah, there is no real process, and it's hard to justify that because there's out of so many people, it should be possible to, yeah. Yeah.
That's my time.
Yeah. All right. So can I talk to you, Edwin?
Yep, listening.
Right. I find it interesting to learn about NVCa-b-t, whatever, through these conversations, these empathy circles. It's like reading a book, not reading a book, but learning from other people who have read the book, from their experience of it.
So you're finding it interesting to learn about these groups, NVCa-b and what T, etc. It's like you're not learning it directly, but learning it through others, like sort of getting the notes about a book from someone else.
Mm. And I'm doing a lot of that since the last year, of not directly taking information in, but rather processing information in kind of formats similar to empathy circles, where people are reflecting each other.
So you're learning about those groups in groups like this, where people are using empathic listening to talk about those groups?
No. It's not about the groups. I just said I learn many things this way, in this way where, like in an empathy circle where people reflect each other, everything that's said is said 2 times.
So you're learning about empathy through these groups because it's
not
sort of
about
repeated?
empathy.
Oh,
about many things like books or like now the NVC communities, and about philosophy, about racism, whatever. So
so you're using this process to learn about a lot of different things. So
yeah.
And you find that interesting that you're learning that way.
Mm-hmm. And so on the other hand, I feel a certain lack of own knowledge of the group, so yeah, or
Yes.
of any topic. It's a bit like swimming without having solid ground beneath my feet.
So you don't have the direct experience with these topics. You're sort of learning them sort of secondhand, but not specifically directly.
Mm. And when I first heard about NVC 1.5 years ago, maybe, I did join a group similar to that. It was an email group in German about parents, and we did try to give empathy in written form to each other, and it was mostly quiet. And when I was new, I shared a lot things that were going on for me, and it was fun to see people help me. It was really appreciated a lot by me. I was grateful for having such a group.
Yeah, so you took part in a family empathy, NVC group, a list?
An email list, a
an
Yahoo
email
list was this.
Okay, yeah. So you took part in an email list, an NVC email list, and you found it very interesting, and you shared things on it, and yeah.
It was very quiet. Not many people shared things. Then I started to share a lot, and then people came out of their holes and they answered to me and explored together with me. And I experienced that as very helpful. So I think that's similar to the NVCa-b-t group, maybe, or C group. It was for parents.
Yeah, so you found it very helpful. You shared some things, and then people came out and started giving you, kind of feedback and comments on it, and you found that just really helpful. And you're thinking that there's maybe a parallel with that and these groups that we're talking about.
I see that this is the groups we are talking about are a bit similar. Yeah, the purpose is similar to the group I have been in, and I have made my own experiences in that group.
So you just see it's like maybe a parallel kind of type of groups. So maybe you have that personal experience with that group, so that maybe transfers to these groups. 20 seconds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm curious what we are finding.
Yeah, so curious what we're going to come up with. Okay, I'll speak to James.
Listening.
Okay, so I just wanted to recap the kind of what I'm interested in here is that I was banned from 2 NVC groups, and I was banned for offering public empathy. So doing what we're doing right here, creating a space to have mutual empathic listening that is recorded. So for doing what we're doing right here, I was banned from these NVC groups.
So you're recapping your reason. What's interesting, what you want to focus on here, which is that you were banned from 2 NVC groups for doing this, basically, for offering empathy and for offering this kind of call.
And for it being public, like being recorded and it being public. And it was by Ray Taylor and Eric Hung, I guess. I'm not sure pronounce that, but they're the admins in those groups, NVCa and B. And So, so that's sort of what I'm wanting to explore is, oh, I didn't turn on the time. So I just explore, you know, being banned, and I know you've been banned from a lot of groups. So yeah, it's so just what is going on with this banning? You know, why ban? You know, why is there not a mechanism for, you know, dialogue? You know, what the heck is going on? It's like I'm a little bit in like, whoa, this is what's going on here.
So Eric Huang and Ray Taylor are the admins. They banned you, and you're wondering what's going on. You know, I've been banned from a lot of groups. Why, you're wondering, why are there no mechanisms for addressing being banned or the process of being banned? Yeah, you're just wondering what's going on. What's going on at a deeper level that it's necessary to shut down dialogue.
Yeah, and it's also in the restorative circle groups too. I've seen it. It's like you've been in, you know, conflict with those groups. It goes on. And this is like a couple of years that I'm aware of it. And even back then, I was wondering, why doesn't anybody just hold an empathy circle with you? It's like you know, what is going on that people will not take the time to just say, well, let's have an empathy circle. Let's make it public. Let's, you know, just have it. The battle is public. You know, Ray is saying all this kind of stuff about me. It's all public. You know, it's all these judgments, all these criticisms, you know, all this stuff, it's all public. But when I say, let's have a public empathy circle about that, it's like, oh no, we can't do this.
Yeah. So you notice it going on in the restorative circles group as well, where battles are taking place publicly for years, years and years. These disagreements are happening, and you're just wondering, why doesn't anyone offer to do an empathy circle with me and talk about it publicly? If the battle is happening publicly, what's the problem with having a dialogue between the people who are battling and have that public?
Yeah, you were saying, well, it takes too much. Somebody was saying, I don't have time for this. You know, they got time for selling workshops, but why can't they kind of walk the talk? You know, it's like, and also it's like these conflicts go on. There's like it's like if you're going to address a conflict, you know, you address it up front and it'll save you 2 years, you know, down the road. I mean, it's much more efficient if we're talking about efficiency just to address it.
Yeah, so people give a reason that they don't have time, but they do have time to do their workshops for money. And you also think if it's just the efficiency question, it's more efficient to engage with the conflict rather than have it constantly bubbling up, you know, for years. You address it directly, and then you don't. You actually save time.
Yeah. So it's so for me, it's these things are so obvious, and it's like it's like, and I've tried to do that, like with you. You know, I've had you kind of disrupt groups, but I try to have a dialogue, create a space. There's never been a time that I've had a problem with you in an empathy circle. I mean, never. It's been more outside of that structure where there's been some kind of conflict. So you always follow the rules, the agreement that we have in an empathy circle. So yeah, so that's
right. So your experience with me is that you've never had a problem with me within an empathy circle, that the problems have always kind of erupted in the outside areas of some kind, but within the empathy circle structure, that it's clear, and I always follow the structure.
And there's something much deeper in the whole culture, because I have the same thing with, you know, politically left, where, you know, I try to create these dialogues and they say, no, we're not going to talk. We don't want to give this person attention. You know, they're evil, you know, we're going to this supports them. So this is going to sort of the core problem in the culture of sort of this lack of dialogue, you know, this lack of willing to dialogue. That's my time too.
Yeah, so it's not just with me, it's not just with these NVC groups. it's something deeper. There's something deeper in the culture. You experience it with some of the left-right political dialogues where people take this approach of, we don't want to give them attention. We don't want to give them a platform to speak. And
there's a ton of reasons, and I could go through and just all those reasons, but they all have the same, core effect.
They give a lot of reasons, but they all have the same effect of shutting down, making dialogue impossible.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
Nellie, would you listen to me?
Yes.
So actually I have a question. Was Edwin banned? Because I see that Ray's last post has said that Edwin is free. He said, Ray said, Edwin is of course free to post his the recordings of these talks in NVCa. And I checked the group and I do see Edwin as a member still in that group. So I just have a factual question about whether Edwin was banned or not. And secondly, I mentioned before about following the leaders, because a lot of these groups, they revolve around a few celebrity trainer individuals, and particularly Mickey. And I was kicked out of the Overcoming Patriarchy group on Facebook 2.5 or 3 years ago. That was the first group I've ever been kicked out of in my life, really. And I've been pursuing it doggedly. I've been pursuing a process doggedly with Mickey and with that group, and they have been stonewalling me. And that, for me, that's the key. The key is there, because it's the first group I've been kicked out of. And Mickey is a celebrity NVC trainer who, talks about, nonviolent, worldwide, global liberation. I want to know what aspect of this exclusion process does she take seriously? How does she deal with it? And she has totally dropped it. In 2 hours from right now is the Overcoming Patriarchy call. It's a call. It happens every month. And the call and the Facebook group are different. I sent Mickey an email 2 weeks ago. I said, just tell me, I would like some clarity. Am I welcome at the call or not? I feel that I'm in alignment with the call and I'd like to participate. Can you just give me a clear answer if I'm welcome? She said, no. I've told you before, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to explain it again. So I actually, from her, I just don't know if I'm welcome or not. The only way to know is I go to the call in 2 hours and possibly get kicked out or not. And I haven't tried to do that in a year. The last time I tried to do that, I went to the call, same logic, nothing has changed. And she made a public announcement. She said, I see James is on the call. That's a problem. Why is he here? I may have to forcefully kick him out. And I said, don't forcefully kick me out. I'm leaving. I didn't know I wasn't welcome. I thought that I had followed the requests that you made for me to attend. She made 2 requests. It was to be in alignment, for me to decide for myself if I'm in alignment with the purpose of the call and to have an understanding of the impact of my actions, and for me to decide that. And that seemed reasonable to me. And so that's why I went back. And so then she challenged my being there, and I didn't understand it. So I don't have a clear understanding of the boundaries or of the requests that would allow me to reintegrate into her group. And that is the key. Clear boundaries. The reason I'm able to work within the empathy circle structure is because the boundaries and the expectations are clear. She is not presenting clear boundaries. She's saying, she says, I have clear boundaries. I said, well, what are these? She says, I'm not going to tell you. Well, then, excuse me, but they're not clear.
Are you okay if I try to reflect?
Yes, please.
So I hear question about whether how he is banned from the NVCa-b groups. And I hear the question about leaders in the NVC community, and as an example, Mickey Kashtan. And that example is important to you because it's the first, it has been the first group you have ever been banned from. And it's you have tried to get back into that group to find a way from your side. And
no, actually, I've tried to have discussions with the people in that group, not get back into it. I've tried to have discussions about my banishment.
So you wanted to talk with people which are still in the group about the fact that you were banned.
Yeah.
And you don't find that there were clear they did communicate clearly what you can do.
Let's not mix up two things. The Facebook group for that call is kind of independent from Mickey. I've really been pursuing dialogue with Mickey about her telephone call, two different things that are related.
Okay.
It's really the telephone call, and I've been pursuing dialogue with Mickey about my participation in the telephone call.
So in particular, you have asked Mickey for a dialogue about participating in the telephone call and not in the Facebook group, which is not led directly by Mickey.
Yeah. That's my time?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Edwin, can you listen?
Listening.
Yeah, I'm interested in the various reasons, or how leaders get to handle exclusion. How the problem of exclusion is mostly left with them, and how this is maybe causing the problem that they are overloaded with the weight of handling it so easily, even if it's just like in James' first share, he said it's just few people who get excluded from those NVC groups, but still, if the responsibility for the decision to exclude and also the decision to re-include maybe is solely held by the leaders of the administrators of the group, then even just 6 cases or so can be really challenging because one person can't or doesn't want, and also the person who is taking care of many other things for the group, like providing some direction, maybe helping people to work together better, or to helping solve some minor conflicts which don't lead to exclusion. But so I think a leader has a lot of things to keep in mind. And
well, can I reflect that? So
yeah, sure.
So what I'm hearing is that you're looking at the leader of these groups and just seeing that they have a lot that they're dealing with, and you're sort of wondering, what is the mechanism where they would exclude someone, and that maybe they just have a lot that they're dealing with, and maybe also, is there other ways of structuring exclusion where the participants have more participation in it, so it's more democratic in some way, or a group decision?
Yeah. I think as it's the leaders have so much responsibility, that's actually putting a high pressure and maybe causing them to break down in the face of a difficult situation.
So the leaders or the organizers just have a lot on their plate. They have a lot they're dealing with. And so dealing with this exclusion and so forth is just more than they can sort of handle, or?
And that's not what I said. It's
Okay.
or what I wanted to say.
Sure.
I think that's what I said before, that they have many other tasks. But what I said now is that it's their responsibility in the end. Or they feel responsible, at least. I think that's often how it goes. So they don't have an understanding of the group is responsible for how the community is responsible for the community experience, but they think it's all, they have to take care of each and every of their participants.
Yeah, the facilitator or the leader takes on all the responsibility for the group instead of that responsibility being shared through the group. And that's, yeah. So you're really addressing that sense of responsibility.
And I think it's coming both ways. One hand, the leaders are very much taking on that role and saying, yes, I want to say how everything's done. And I decide I want to take care of all my babies, those 10,000 babies I'm taking care of in this group.
Right.
And on the other hand, the people who are in the group, they also fuel that dynamic by not speaking up and not showing up as people who can carry responsibility.
Yeah, so the leaders are sort of taking the responsibility on, plus the participants are sort of giving their responsibility, not taking it themselves, but just putting it onto the leader instead of everybody taking responsibility.
So it's kind of like a Hitler Nazi Germany dynamic in the extreme. You have a leader and people just to follow.
Yeah, so it models the strong leader like Hitler taking all the responsibility, and everybody gives the responsibility to them, and so you see a sort of a parallel, so dynamic.
Yeah. And the leader gets more popular by leading because they practice speaking and handling conflict, and the participants they always get more dependent while being led.
Yeah, so you're seeing a dynamic that the leader kind of gets everyone's attention and the responsibility, and they improve their skills, and others sort of don't because they're not taking that responsibility. So that's just sort of a dynamic that happens.
Yeah,
that was the time too.
Thank you.
So I'll speak back to you. Would be nice to have 4 people so you could mix it up a little bit. So that's I think very insightful what you're saying, because I see that too, is that the leader gets the attention, they get sort of the empathy and the attention from everyone, and then they can sort of develop themselves using that energy, but they sort of usurp the energy from others when they do that. And I see that as a problem too.
Okay, I heard that you resonate with this idea that the leader gets attention and energy from the group, and thereby they can become more glamorous and more able to better human beings. But it's an imbalance there.
Yeah. It's like you get this attention so you can sort of develop your ideas and your concepts and sort of build your persona or whatever. I got hit the time. So
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
4 minutes,
Yeah,
40.
so I see that dynamic happen, and I would say that with the empathy circle is everybody has the responsibility of holding the process. So it's really, there's no real leader per se in the, it's more shared responsibility here in the empathy circle, because we all have the responsibility of just holding the structure.
So you see a difference in the empathy circle because we are holding the structure in a collaborative effort, everyone.
Yeah. And I see that as one problem with NVC is it's sort of guru led. You know, there's these gurus and they just sit and sort of pontificate, and everybody sits there, you know, and, you know, just takes it in. And I see a real problem with that.
So you see in NVC that it's structured, it's happening all over, that you have a guru who is sitting in the center and getting the attention, and everyone else is sitting timidly there and listening.
And I think it started with Marshall Rosenberg. If I look at his presentations, they were all guru. Everybody sits and, you know, it's like, oh, we really need to understand your insight. What is it that you're having to teach us? And he just, it's almost abusive in some ways, the way he was teaching, it seems to me.
So you see the origin of this in Marshall Rosenberg, and you see that at his events where he spoke to people, it was just a one-man show, or he was presenting and everyone was listening, and it's you experienced that as abusive.
I mean, I don't know. There's something there that everybody's sort of struggling to sort of understand what he's saying. He's not saying it clearly, and it's also not this equal empathic dialogue, you know. And so, and I think that model has sort of permeated throughout NVC. It's like everybody wants to be the guru at the center, and everybody's looking at you to you know, for your insights that you somehow, and they don't have any, if you get down to it, they're as screwed up as everybody else. So it's like, really, come on, people, we're all as screwed up as we're all screwed up, and we're all as brilliant as each other.
So you see everyone trying to be in this stage light and doing the same as Marshall, and what he was speaking was not. It sounds like it's so eternal truths, but everyone tries to understand it, but it's escaping. But you can look at it from another view, like he's just one of us, and each of us can say magically ununderstandable things, which maybe would make sense if I spend a lifetime to research it and try to understand it, but that's not really what's important. It's important to realize that every human being has the capacity to say intelligent things, meaningful things.
Yeah, and that's what I like about the empathy circle, because it gives everybody sort of that equal voice, and the guru has to reflect back what, you know, what the other people are saying, just like they get reflected back. So I think that it has more of a quality, an equality. So we all kind of grow together, right? It's not like the guru gets all this attention and gets to develop their ideas through using other people's attention, but we're sharing the attention here.
So you see that in empathy circle, people develop because the attention is put on everyone equally.
Yeah. And finally, I think, oh yeah, I didn't stop. And I'll just, I want to answer I have been banned totally. I can't even get into NVCa-b And NVCa, I can't post. I can see, but I'm not allowed to post. So that was just wanted to clear that. So that is a form of banning. So if you just reflect that, I feel fully
Okay,
heard.
yeah, sure. I'd love to. So NVCa-b, which is not a public group, you can't see anymore. You're excluded, and NVCa you can see, but you are not allowed to post.
Right. Yep. Feel heard.
All right. So I'll go in the other direction. James, will you listen? Okay.
Listening.
Yeah. Yeah, I came from, I found my voice through developing or building a support system for myself, which is basically finding people who have some space to listen to me. Not necessarily in a format like the empathy circle, but in a group, but much in one-on-one conversations. Can you get that?
Yeah, so you have been creating a system for yourself where you've been learning about empathy through one-on-one support conversations mostly.
I've developed my capacity to speak up for to formulate my thoughts by, in a way, like Edwin said, with having space and attention of people to listen to me.
So you've developed your ability to formulate your thoughts by having spaces where people pay attention to you.
And I created those spaces. I got the idea from Dominic Barta, and I created those spaces by asking for people to listen to me for 10 minutes without speaking. And that helped a lot.
So these are spaces that you created. You got the idea and the inspiration from Dominic Barter, and you just started out by asking people to listen to you for 10 minutes.
In silence.
In silence, that they'd silently listen to you.
And it was bumpy because as soon as anyway. So I share this value of for each person to have spaces where they can learn, where they can speak without danger of being challenged for what they say. This seems to be the essential thing to develop human some capacity to speak, and or ability to speak, and courage to speak.
So you see it as a kind of prerequisite, and it's necessary for people in order to develop the ability to speak. It's necessary for them to have a space where they can speak without being challenged while they're speaking.
And and listened, like, okay, get attention from people.
So that space, the characteristic of that space is that they're not challenged, but they're listened to. The attention is on them, and they get listened to.
So and I see an abundance of possibilities to get that. I was able to create that for myself out of nothing, no NVC context, but it was helpful to find people who are aware of the concept. So I did listen to maybe 20 hours of Marshall Rosenberg book or session recordings, or maybe 50 hours. So and it was valuable to learn about those ideas, but I don't think it's necessary. You can also, someone could have just started talking to me in an empathy circle, and I would have learned it as well. So.
Yeah, so you see that there's a variety of spaces to get the learning about how that experience of being listened to. And you started off by listening to a number of hours of Marshall Rosenberg talk that gave you kind of a starting point, but you don't think it's necessary. You think you could have learned it just as well in an empathy circle being listened to.
Mm. I think the community of people who have an awareness of the value of this is important, because these people are easier, and it's starting on a higher level, communicating with them, than just talking to people who have never heard of the idea. It can be very frustrating with those people.
So it's important to have a community of people with an appreciation and awareness and knowledge about listening, because in that it's in relation, it's with people who value it and do it that you learn it.
Yeah, I think that's my time.
Okay. Edwin, would you listen to me?
Mm-hmm. Listening.
So I'm always interested in what the unspoken rules are, and unspoken rules, the only way to find out what the unspoken rules are is to break them. So in an empathy circle, there are both spoken rules and unspoken rules. And I think that if someone were to break the unspoken rules, we would find out both. We would find out about the unspoken rules. We'd also find out about the power structure. So, I think it's mostly unspoken, but I think it's true that, you're the circle holder here, Edwin. This is your Zoom room. You have the power over the buttons, and it's not relevant unless someone is breaking the unspoken rules, or maybe even there are spoken rules, but that it becomes relevant around. But the more ambiguous and the more vagueness there is around what the rules are, the more dangerous it becomes to learn, to do things, because you might break a rule and the learning will come, down, the authority will come out, and the punishment will come down. So,
Can I reflect that?
yeah.
This is what I'm hearing. So you're looking at the structures and the rules that are the nature of the rules, and that you and sometimes they're kind of vague what the rules are, and that by sort of breaking the rules, you can sort of see what those rules are. Plus, if the rules are very vague, then there's kind of problems you see of that. And you're just saying that here in the empathy circle, there's a certain power structure. I have I set it up to create it, I can do the eject, and I've got the structural sort of power.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're sort of just looking at the nature of that.
So there's a fantasy, I think, that, in restorative justice communities, that they have the answers. And I think there are problems with punitive justice. But one of the great things about punitive justice is that often the boundaries are written out very clearly. For example, I was looking that there's a code in my city, because I have some upholstered furniture on my porch, and my neighbor said, it's illegal to have it. And so I looked it up, and it's written there, it's like code 27. You may not have upholstered furniture on a porch. If you do, you will be fined $100 a day for every day until you remove the furniture. The punishment is clear. The rule is clear, right? We don't have that in the empathy circle, right? If I start screaming when it's Nellie's turn, we don't have a thing that says James will, be removed from empathy circles for 1 month or whatever. And so without that clarity of what happens if you break the rule, the only way to find out is to break the rule and see, what does Edwin do? And I may not want to find, right? I may consider that's too risky. I don't want to just find out. But if we want to have a strong container, we need that, because somebody else may come along one day and they may want to find out, right? And then you, Edwin, or whoever the circle holder is, it'll be their job to say, well, now what do I do? Do I want to, never allow them in? Do I want to have, 3 empathy circles and then you can come back in? Or do we just leave it to the circle holder? So again, it's just about I think it's a spectrum of, we can be more clear about what the expectations are and what the consequences are.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing from the punitive justice system, it's been laid out, the rules and then the consequences for those rules. So it gets very specific. And then you have sort of curiosity about an empathy circle, like what are the rules here? Like if somebody speaks out of turn, and so forth, what are the consequences? And it sounds like you would like to see those that's sort of spelled out in more detail. But
it's important if we don't want it to what happened to me to happen again, right? So let's say I said someone is full of shit and I said it out of turn one time. And Bill said, that's the reason you can't participate in my facilitation training. Well, okay, but it's problem, that's not laid out in advance. And I totally get why that's not laid out in advance, because there's lots of things that aren't laid out in advance. But it's also a problem to say, well, you transgressed. Therefore, I now have the freedom to hold that against you forever and do whatever I want to you. I can exclude you. I can, talk badly about you, and I can just do that for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you see that it's a problem that, if you broke a rule, that you're punished forever, that you've transgressed, and there's no redemption sort of process. So you just see that as a problem too, to be addressed.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll speak back to you. It's very interesting. Let me hit the timer. There are so many different things. One is, I'm curious if made a note here about your issues with Mickey, if you've ever requested an empathy circle or, with Mickey. So I'm kind of just curious about that, because we've talked about it before, that if there's a problem, you request an empathy circle first. You request a dialogue, and then it's sort of Kingian nonviolence. So first, reach out, request the dialogue. 2, then you do your actions to bring people to the table, and then you come to the table. So I guess I have just some curiosity if you've ever invited Mickey to a dialogue. You probably have, but yeah.
Yeah, so you have curiosity if I've ever asked Mickey into an empathy circle, because you see it systematically. The Kingian steps would be to invite someone into dialogue, and then if they say no, then to take further steps.
Yeah, like you could go on a hunger strike to the death. You could sit on your porch on your upholstered sofa and then say, I'm going on a hunger strike until I die unless Mickey comes to the table. So that would be kind of a Gandhian sort of approach.
Oh wow, up in the stakes here. Yeah, so you see that the Gandhian approach could be to go on a hunger strike, to make the request, and then sit on my porch and say, you know, until Nikki has an empathy circle with me, I will not eat to the death or something close.
Yeah, so I see that as sort of a dynamic that, you know, Gandhi, King have sort of developed. Like, they're, you know, they're very much about dialogue, about listening, you know, listening to each other. And then the powers that be, it's like it's central to our culture, is don't listen to people. You know, if you have if you have systemic power or just any, you know, it's, people will not dialogue with you. You know, it's like, hey, I have the power, I don't need to talk to you, sort of. So this whole thing of not talking to people seems to be like at the core of the power structure of the country and the world. It's like, it seems to be central to how power is held.
Yeah. So this gambit or this strategy of closing down dialogue or refusing dialogue seems to be at the core of how authority structures hold power, even at the grand international level.
So the other thing is I think it's really interesting with around the empathy circle about the, you know, how would it break down, you know, at what point, and people have, you know, sort of broken the rules in that sense of, you know, the turn taking, sort of the agreement. It's sort of, it's an agreement that, hey, we're coming into this and we have this agreement to do this, and people will, you know, not do it, especially in mediation, in heavy duty conflict mediation, you know, all hell kind of breaks loose. So they're
Yeah,
not even
so
testing it. They're just so triggered. It's like, I can't, you know, wait my turn or something like that.
yeah, so people do break the rules. The you know, the turn structure is in agreement, and people in some of the heavy duty times, they're not even testing it. They just are so triggered, they come in and they flagrantly break the rules.
And in that case, as a facilitator, I try to empathize with them, try to hear where they are because they're so upset, and then try to bring them back into the structure, you know, with being empathic, listening. Okay, it's just kind of like basic mediation, you know, empathic mediation skill. Try to empathize how you're really feeling upset, and you'll get a chance to speak. You know, we want to hear what you have to say. It's important. You know, everybody gets heard to their satisfaction, but, you know, let's just follow the structure, so for fairness. And so those are some of the things that, you know, I do to bring people back into yeah.
Yeah, so when you have a very simple approach, straightforward approach, when people break the rules, you try to listen to the person who is breaking the rules and try to gently invite them back into the structure as you also listen to them.
Yeah, try to empathize with them. You know, sometimes they just need to be heard, and, you know, and then they'll say, "Oh, okay, I will get heard." So they know that they will get heard, that their turn will happen. So that kind of puts them at ease, you know. And then they'll. But I've had it also where it's just like, I'm not doing this. It's like, you know, it's like they're just. And then I say, okay, I can't take part in this because I don't want to take part in this, so I'm going to leave. And I'm like ready to go and leave, and they say, okay, you know, I don't want you to leave, because, you know, so, you know, there's a lot of different manifestations, but it'd be great to articulate all those, you know, because I think that would be very informative to have that sort of laid out and clarity about those. I think it would be helpful for people doing mediations with empathy circles, and that's my time.
Yeah, so you have another, beyond just listening. Sometimes if they're breaking to an extreme, at some point you decide it's not worth it for you to be there, and you let them know. You say, you know, so the structure has been broken. It's continuing to be broken, and so since that's my agreement as being here within the structure, and that's not here, I'm leaving. And then sometimes when you say that, they see that you mean business, and then they may return to the structure.
Yep, I feel heard.
Nellie, would you listen to me?
Mhm.
So because this has been an issue, I've begun to study the philosophy of law. And one thing I learned is that some legal theorists, they take this approach, which is not from the perspective of someone who is moral and wants to obey the law and is just trying to figure out how to obey the law. They take the perspective of the criminal, the person who just wants to know what are the consequences of breaking the rules. And so I thought what Edwin just said is a real great, clear articulation of what those consequences may be. You know, do you want to have a mediation? Well, you know, the consequences of going outside of the structure of the mediation is that we don't have a mediation. That's very clear. You know, and that calls people's bluffs, because many people say they want to have a mediation, and then when it comes down to it, they may not actually, you know, there may be a disagreement about what it means to have a mediation. And so having, you know, having that clarity is very helpful. And
Can I get that part?
yeah.
Yeah. So you have been reading about philosophy of law, and they take the perspective of the criminal and think about what's the consequences about actions that I could do. And the way Edwin has shared that he would leave a group when the people can't find a common understanding of the agreements around structure that have been set up, then this is a some clear boundary which is set up for which is easily to understand for everyone, that if
yeah. So the question is it to the advantage of one of the parties not to have a mediation? Sometimes it is, right? So if you look at the history, for example, of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the US and Israel have you know, it's to their advantage not to have peace talks. They always present themselves as being open to having peace talks. But if you actually look at what's happening, they are preventing peace talks because it's to their advantage to continue to use protective use of force to, you know, to run through their programs of, you know, against Palestine. It's a politically charged example, but I think it's very illustrative of all of these issues around mediation and protective use of force and dialogue. Look at how the aggressor talks about mediation versus how they actually come, whether and how eager they are to come to the table in a neutral way. You know, there's a lot to be learned.
So you're using the example of the conflict between US, Israel, and Palestine, and you say there's a lot of talk about there should be peace talk, there should be mediation, and then when you look at if there's a serious interest in having peace talk, it maybe there is not, and maybe that's the reason why there is no peace talk that's successful, that's really working.
That's right. It's right. The US, of course, says we want to have a peace talk, but if you actually look at what they do, they don't want to have a peace talk. They want to continue the militarization and use of military force to destroy the enemy. And you see you see the same things playing out in these Facebook groups where people say, yeah, we're all about mediation and dialogue. And you say, oh, so what did you do to have a dialogue? Oh, nothing. We didn't do anything, and just don't have time. But we're all about it, And so you have to look at what, the difference between what people say and what they actually do. If you say that you're all about empathy circles, what's the problem with having an empathy circle when you actually have a conflict? What's actually getting in the way? Is it scheduling, or is it a realization that issues will come to light, that you can't address without being changed by the dialogue?
So you're saying that you can conclude from what's happening that, oh, yeah, I'll try to sum up. You can see when people are not following the words of we want to have dialogue, then it's interesting to understand what might be the reason for that. It might be that
more simple. It's important to look at both the actions and the words to see if the words, if the words are backed up by actions.
Yeah. So not just believe the words, also look at the actions and see how they match.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Can I talk back to you, James?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I felt a bit weird about this when you said sounded like you were very sure about the conflict, the political conflict between Israel, US, and Palestine, and I don't feel the same certainty, and maybe I also don't feel the same certainty for other people about that it's really they're not invested in the idea to have a dialogue or peace process or anything. I think it's they may well hold two things at the same time within their person. Like they want peace and they also want to not give up the benefits they have or whatever keeps them from actually entering a dialogue.
Yeah, so you heard me talk about Israel-Palestine conflict, and you heard me talking about it with a kind of certainty that you don't share. You wonder if instead some of the parties want peace and also did you say that they want dialogue and they also want to continue doing?
Yes, I think it's like humans are probably just overwhelmed with two very conflicting things they could do. I could have an empathy circle, but then I wouldn't have time to go have a good meal tonight. So, and then when they're faced with things that are so conflicting, they might just lose track of the importance of one thing.
So you're saying that people are complex and they may want contradictory things simultaneously, and then they go after one and lose track of the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's maybe also related to this issue that people in general are very deprived of space to explore what they want and what's happening in their lives, like someone who's listening empathically to them.
So people are generally deprived. It's related to the problem that there are no spaces for people to go where somebody's listening to them and they have a chance to explore what's really important to them.
Yeah. So I found that often when I'm doing things that I don't really like someone asked me to help with preparation of the meal for the family, and I'm not doing that. And then I realize when I have the opportunity to speak with someone, I realize that it's because I'm really, really tired and I just can't find the energy to do it in this moment. Maybe that can be a reason, but if I don't have the space to explore what's going on for myself, I never realized that, and I just do things that are not, maybe I help and I feel really bad about it, or maybe I don't help and I feel really bad about it. But I'm not doing informed choices. I'm not aware what choices I have, and I'm not aware what are good reasons to choose either this or that.
You're not always aware of the choices you have and the reasons that you might have for making one choice versus the other.
Yeah, and this knowledge about choices and reasons increases when I have space to explore with someone witnessing that, so someone listening empathically to me.
Knowledge about what you want and about your reasons for what you want increases as you have someone listen to you empathically.
Yes, I think I'll just hand over. I think it's almost my time.
Edwin, please listen to me.
Listening.
Yeah, so you asked before if I have ever asked Mickey to have an empathy circle. No, I have not. And I've been learning and being inspired by some of what from you, Edwin, about some of the ways that I could be clearer about what I want and ask for that more directly. And I think the request to have an empathy circle, I think, is a great example of a very specific, clear, request for dialogue that, it makes it more doable because it's, you're making a clear timed request, like 90 minutes, we'll talk for 90 minutes on Zoom. That's very clear.
Yeah, so I could reflect that. So you're just answering the question that you're saying you haven't asked for an empathy circle with Mickey, and you're sort of thinking about it and seeing maybe the benefits of it. It's a clear request, it's timed, and just sort of contemplating it as a sort of a strategy or something, or.
Yes, actually, as I say it, I feel a little bit emotional and vulnerable because I can see it's hard. It's frightening to ask for what I want.
So you're feeling vulnerable, bit of fear, anxiety about really just asking what you want might be rejected or something.
Yeah. And I'm joining on what Nellie has said about getting just how useful it is to get clear about what I want. That's fully within my power, and is separate from this question of whether people will say yes or not.
So just getting clear on what it is that you're wanting or would like, and that's separate whether they accept or not. But and there's some vulnerability in there in saying what it is that you would like.
Yeah. I'll add to that and say that that's the same thing. Well, yeah, it's almost the same for Bill. I invited him to the Messenger thread about having an empathy circle, got no response. And I thought, do I just take that message of no response as a no, or do I kind of send an email and follow up? It's emotionally very difficult because, constantly showing up and like with what I want and being called like a psychopath or being, yelled at and told like, I tried to do it with you and you didn't want it or whatever, it's, one time, 10 times, it's manageable, but then 100 times it just gets like they get worn down from this the work of just showing up with what I want.
Yeah, it wears you down. You would like to have a dialogue, and you try different methods to kind of have it, and you get rejected, and it gets kind of exhausting after a while.
So to return to this point about like wanting multiple things, it's always the oppressor, the person with power, always claims to want something good, whether it's Hitler or the U.S. government or a policeman beating someone with a billy club. They say, I just wanted to protect myself. I just wanted, I would just like, I don't want graffiti on the Portland courthouse. That claim of wanting this other good thing, if we allow that to be a justification for the physical violence, it's a problem.
Yeah, so the protectors, the rescuers, they're always saying that they're doing it out of for positive reasons, and they're not seeing sort of the effect that they're having.
And I'm
so
giving
when somebody's trying to rescue somebody else from the psychopath, they don't see that they're sort of being a psychopath towards the person that they're calling a psychopath or something like that. So.
It's true for the physical violence examples, but it's also true for all of the freedom of speech issues where Hitler, believed in freedom of speech for the people he agreed with. We always agree on giving people that agree with us freedom of speech. It's giving people the ability to speak who disagree with us, which is, if you believe in freedom of speech, that's what you have to do to demonstrate that you actually believe in freedom of speech, not just give it to the people who agree with you. And so
that was the time too. But so it's really about freedom of speech. If you have this value, you have to apply it to all people, not just to people you agree with, but the people you disagree with. If you're saying that that is your value,
yes,
of freedom of speech, for example.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Nellie.
Okay.
Shoot, I had something I wanted to say, and I'm forgetting it now. So, Yeah, so I guess I'm going to bring it back to the group where Ray and Eric have banned me, and then I have asked for an empathy circle with them, and they're saying no. So it parallels what James is talking about. It's like, yeah, I'm asked. He hasn't like specifically, clearly, in some cases, asked for the empathy circle. Oh, Harry, who's that?
Ari.
I'm gonna remove them just for because it's too late for.
Yeah.
Let me, since we're almost over here. So yeah, so it's the same thing as you request an empathic dialogue, you know, be it, and so that's the first step is to make that request. Yeah, so I'm just kind of starting to think through this a little bit. I don't know if you can try.
Who were you talking to? Sorry.
Oh, it was Nellie.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have actually requested an empathy circle with Ray and Eric.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But they didn't want to have one. So
Right.
they declined your request.
Yeah, and it's similar to what James is talking about. So the first thing is you have to be willing to, like, you know, he hasn't asked Mickey for an empathy circle or an empathic dialogue. And, you know, so there's the steps, right? There's the steps. First you make the request, and then they don't take part. And then they can decide not to take part. And then what actions do you do at that point? You say, oh, okay, you don't want to do it, then that's the end of it. You know, Martin Luther King, like, oh, we'd like to talk to you about, you know, the lack of equality in Birmingham. And it's like, they say, no, we don't want to talk to you. And then you do a bus boycott, do you, you know, go to the streets, you know, what do you do to bring people to the table?
Yeah, so you're seeing making a request is the first step, and you have done that. James didn't yet.
And he has with
Mickey.
others, so it sounds like he has with like Bill.
But he has done that with Bill. Yeah, and then the request is declined, and what comes next? Just yeah, but then maybe possible steps of conflict escalation can happen.
Yeah, like, you know, do your fasting to the death on your sofa on your front porch. You know, so, you know, it's like there are methods to bring people to the table. You go to the lunch counters and you sit there and you get beat up. You know, it's like there are methods. So yeah, so I'm just sort of thinking through this because I think there is this, and there's something about that. It does the culture value this dialogue to begin with? Does it value that, yes, this is how we solve problems, this is how we address problems, that it's within the culture, it's kind of mixed. It's like it's part of that authoritarianism that, you know, you're talking about. People are mixed. On one hand they value dialogue, on the other hand they value that not dialoguing. So we have these mixed sort of values.
So you're wondering if or you perceive that in society some people are really in favor of escalating this and or even just having the dialogue, and some people are just want that the authority decides for them, and they are react aggressive towards people who want to stand up for the right for dialogue.
Yeah, it's like that, having that dialogue, people have all kinds of excuses for not having it, for not doing it. You know, it's like, I don't want to give that person attention. If I listen to them, I'm going to give them power. I mean, it's just, and I can feel it. There's sort of a rigidity, a closeness, sort of a numbness that's there. And it seems that what I'm looking for is, can we shift society that says, hey, it's obvious that we do empathic dialogue from the get-go. It's just, it becomes a cultural norm. you know, because it's not a cultural norm now. It's sort of like you have to fight to be heard. You have to do demonstrations. You have to, it's all this stuff. It's just, it's not a cultural norm. And I think that's what I would like to create, is that culture of empathy, which where that empathic dialogue is just a norm. Oh yeah, of course we do this. This is how we solve problems or issues.
Hmm. So you see that people give a lot of reasons for why they don't want to listen, and you would like people, the society, to shift their norms around, and such that it's a very natural, obvious thing to ask for being heard in an empathic way.
Yeah, and it's the whole society, and it relates to even individual things, like with Ray and Eric, or James and Mickey, and you know, it scales all the way through society. These values that of not of you know, fear or protection or whatever. Yeah.
So you perceive that it's present on all levels, like a fractal.
Yeah.
If we have it on the personal level, or the little groups like Vicky Kashtan's group, or the empathy circle facilitator training group, or yeah, when these people see it as natural, it would it's in a similar way important as that people like politicians who decide for whole nations see it as important.
Yeah, I feel heard.
Thank you. Hmm. James, will you listen to me?
Yes, I'm listening.
One thing that's coming up for me is this question about as leaders or people with who are more visible, more public figures, they are seen by many people. So many people may develop a desire to dialogue with them, and they can't possibly do it with everyone because they're only human. They have only 24 hours each day like everyone else. And so I'm wondering if there could be a system that would catch that, like yeah, people with similar interests grouping together and then having a possibility to engage in dialogue with someone who is, yeah, I don't know. It's just I wanted to name the problem.
So people who are well known have a lot of people who want to talk to them, and they have, you know, they're just one person, they're just humans. So you're wondering what can resolve that practical issue to make it possible for the dialogues to happen when so many people want to talk to one person.
Mm-hmm. And also unrelated to, I wanted to say that I sent a friend, Pari Risaya. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, from Iran. So she just joined, and yeah, I'm a bit sad that she couldn't stay because she has done on her own for 4 months empathy circles in Iran. So I'm really proud of that she did that.
So the person who just tried to join late was Party, who has been doing empathy circles in Iran.
Organizing, not
organizing.
participating.
She's been organizing an empathy circle for 4 months, and you're very happy about that, and you're sad that she couldn't participate.
Yeah, but I also see that it's as Edwin didn't know her, and that it's we're in the middle or almost at the end. So it would have been I probably would have made the same decision as the leader of this group, the host.
You think it makes sense that she was not allowed to join because we're almost at the end. You think you would have made the same decision?
Uh-huh. And it's kind of an exclusion, so we have seen an exclusion happening here.
It's a micro exclusion. We've just had experience that we've done to someone.
Yeah. And I tried to speak up. I said, hello, Perry. And yeah, we can see the dynamic of Edwin. He didn't ask us. He was taking the responsibility for having this meeting, giving this meeting value, and structure and focus and whatever.
Yeah, you tried to speak up. You said hello, Perry, but Edwin took the reins as the leader. He made the decision. He didn't check with us.
Mm. And I didn't really object. I didn't. I just thought, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
You agreed with the leader's decision, partially.
I agreed with the decision. I maybe didn't agree with the decision-making process fully. Because I actually had more information I could have brought in. I think Pari would have been able to participate in a meaningful way. So there would have been value in bringing my information in. And I didn't have the courage or the to actually stand up for that. And it happened, everything happened very, very quickly. So
you think you maybe agreed with the decision, maybe not. You don't think you agreed with the decision-making process because you had some information, and you see how you played a part in it where you didn't find the courage to speak up, to bring the information that you had.
And also that it's happening so quickly. And I think that's what happens always when an exclusion happens. All those exclusions I've seen so far, I won't say they are all related to James because he's hating me for saying that. He's attacking me for saying that. But yeah, I've seen things going very quickly from everyone feeling peaceful to the red zone, green zone to red zone, and then exclusion happening.
So it happened very quickly just before, and you think that often when exclusion happens, it happens very quickly, and you don't want to say that all of the cases are related to me, because when you say that, I've attacked you for saying that. But
well, actually, I think I have become aware of exclusion. Before, I just was part of it and I didn't think about it much, or I even excluded, but I didn't think about it. And since I know you, I've observed it more, and I think that's my time.
All right. Edwin, would you listen to me?
Yeah, listening.
In the empathy circle that I did this morning, somebody participated and they left, and it was just in their video, there was just an empty chair. And I found myself thinking, what would Edwin do? Would Edwin allow this? Would they remove the person? I noticed it was interesting because I do so much facilitation in a different system that it's interesting that I doubted my own judgment because I was using a different system. And I was really annoyed. Oh, I think my battery's gonna die. Sorry. I was really annoyed because it was disrupting the group.
I experienced it as disruptive, but I didn't want to just deal with it personally. I wanted to have a system, kind of like a rule or a law, like a system, a plan of, well, in this case, if somebody is, not in their chair doing the empathy circle, do I want to remove them or not? So that people could know, so that when people come, they know what the expectation is. Not that I'm acting like an authoritarian, but just here are the clear boundaries. When you're participating in the group, you need to be sitting there with your face, there, and like not just for 5 minutes, and then you're like chopping cucumbers for 5 minutes, and then you're sitting in your chair for 5 minutes, because that's disruptive. And so I actually took refuge in Edwin's decision to not include someone who was joining in. Even though I really wanted her to participate, I kind of took it as it was almost unspoken, but you join at the beginning or you don't join at all. And that is an exclusion. And I am totally aware that I do exclusions all the time. If I call my mother, I am not calling my sister. I'm excluding my sister in that way for that phone call. We do it all the time. So, well, I've said a lot. Would you?
Yeah, so you had an empathy circle just previously, and in it someone was left the chair. There was no one there, and you were like upset about it. That you're noticing yourself being upset. And it's like wondering like what Edwin do in that situation, and so it's just kind of exploring the nature of exclusion in this context, as well as just saying that we do exclude all the time. You do put your attention here, and that means you don't put your attention there. So just sort of having that awareness that there's these forms of exclusion, and in terms of the person that I just got ejected, that you sort of could see that, yeah, you come at the beginning and you stay, and so there's
Yeah, I think the thing I want to get heard on is that for me, like I see the value in being explicit about all of these things, like, because if I'm not explicit, they will continue to happen. So if I have an empathy circle and it's disruptive to have people not in their chairs, I want to be explicit and say, for my circles, I expect you to be in your chair during the circle. And if you're not going to be in your chair, then I may remove you. I may remove anybody who's just not in their chair during the circle. Don't take it personally. That's the boundary. So, and I also don't want to be reactive about these things. So I notice it. I noticed that it was disruptive, and then it's not a punishment. It's drawing the boundaries and come back and say, like, if you want to know what the boundaries of this community are and this series is, this is what it is.
Yeah, so you want it to be just clear that what the boundaries are in advance. So if you're not, for example, if you're not in your seat, that you'll be ejected, and that's sort of posted somewhere in advance. So just have that sense of clarity. It's not that you're being punished or something. It's just what sort of happens in sort of a structural way.
There's a person in the in the empathy circles with you, Edwin, who I hear she's often saying boundaries in relation to James. She never talks to me. I want to say to her, I totally agree. I love boundaries. I would love to know what her boundaries are. I have no idea because we don't have any dialogue, right? So she wants me to respect her boundaries, but she doesn't want to tell me what they are. And so you can't just say boundaries. You have to actually say what the boundaries are. Otherwise, people will break your boundaries because they just don't know what they are.
Yeah, so you just like to have clear, explicit boundaries. If someone is saying I have boundaries, but then they don't say what they are, don't articulate them, that's, you kind of have a problem with that, because you would like them to be clear and articulate what those boundaries are. And that was the time to.
Great. Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay, I'll speak back to you.
Listening.
Yeah, I would like to have more of those. You know, just the context sort of set, or what are the boundaries? What are the agreements? I think that's all really good to articulate. And you can't say it at the beginning of the circle either, because you'd be spending, you know, 10 minutes or 20 minutes going through all of those. So it's good to maybe have them written out somewhere so people can see it.
Yeah, you like the idea of having clear, explicit boundaries, maybe written somewhere so that you're not taking up time to go over it.
And when somebody, I have found that, you know, I had tried to include people if they came late, you know, in other circles. It's always very disruptive. The person doesn't know what's going on. People are in sort of a flow. So in general, when we go into the breakout rooms, you know, nobody new comes in. Those rooms are sort of locked. I didn't lock this one. So yeah, so that's sort of the problem that I see. That with, you know, new people entering, it's just very disruptive and confusing for everyone.
Yeah, people, you tend to seal the rooms after it starts, because your experience is that if you don't, people come in, they don't know what's going on, and it also disrupts the flow of the conversation that's been created already.
And then, in a sense, why did they come an hour and a half late? You know, they were sort of excluding themselves for an hour and a half. So that's the other issue. Like, what's going on there? So, and then I didn't know if the person stumbled in, because, you know, this is sort of a public URL, so people kind of pop in and out just because, oh, let me test this link. So so I didn't know it was going. So, but yeah, having it all kind of articulated is good. I think is good to do.
People may come in for various reasons. They may just be testing a link, but you said it's relevant that they self-excluded for the first beginning amount of time as well.
So I do want to go back to the thing with Ray and Eric, you know, being sort of banned from those groups, and then I invite them to a dialogue and they say, no way, you know. So it's like, where do you go from there? Maybe I can go on a hunger strike on my porch. It's like, you know, I mean, how much, you know, it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, where do you go? But I had thought that we could have some dialogues here, but you see, it's only us showing up. It's like all those people, they don't show up. They did, a few showed up last time, but it's like, you know, Chris and Richard showed up, but, you know, the others in the group, they don't want to, it's like they're not showing up to, you know, kind of walk the talk, if you ask me. Yeah.
So returning to the main theme of the call, what can one do when someone basically says, I'm not interested in dialogue? You could go on a hunger strike to the death, or you can have conversations with the people that show up, but, you know, the people who don't show up and say they're into dialogue are not walking the talk.
Yeah. And, you know, I can go and post and, you know, be a thorn. I can, you know, I was thinking, oh, I can create some polls, you know, and, you know, we can, I don't know if you're still part of that group, but, you know, we could post these videos there. I don't know that anybody's posted these recordings there. So, you know, just kind of keep stirring the pot. Kind of, you know, I'm posting at other places, and yeah, it's like, you know, you can just kind of keep the issue alive through, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't know if I'm still able to post there, but you think, you know, you think about what being a thorn or escalating in some way by posting and continuing to talk where you can and with who shows up.
Yeah, it's time consuming. You know, it's like I got other things to do, and I'm kind of seeing that group is, the group is more, I don't know if it's kind of worth it, to spend time on those groups. These groups are really kind of I wanted to say full of shit, which I don't want to say. It's like there's something missing there. It's like, there's other areas to put the energy into that there's something missing. They don't, it's like, I don't know what the word is there's it's not as dynamic or interesting as I kind of thought those groups were. There's something kind of missing. There's
So you're noticing, you're acknowledging that it's time consuming to escalate conflict through dialogue and posts, and you're not sure that it's even worth it with that particular group. You don't want to be disparaging and say they're full of shit, but you're looking for the words of how, it's not as dynamic, or, it's not following through on the claims of what they're about. And
so I feel heard.
Nellie, would you listen to me?
Mm-hmm.
This is probably the last. We have just 10 minutes, so
Okay.
The last one.
This has been my quest and my question for the last 2.5 years. When I am excluded from a community and people don't want to have dialogue with me, how do I want to respond? My response has been to seek out people who will talk to me, and at the same time, reflect on the information I have about the group or the person who doesn't want to talk to me. And that has proven remarkably constructive. And, on principle, I stay open. I try to stay open to talk to anyone. This idea that some groups are not worth my time, it's true in the sense that the difference in values may exist and may grow even. And so with that group, I would agree that I have, as a result of being kicked out, gotten much more value in the places that I came to, discovered, or created by necessity. And so my desire to be, let's say, back into that group, and I'm not, I can't post in that group, but my desire to be back in that group exists out of principle. I see the value, but in terms of what benefits it has for me being there, has become negligible, close to zero. And that's not an insult. That's not an insult to that group at all. I respect the journey that people are on. I used to go and sit zazen in Zen temples. I don't do that anymore. I haven't been excluded. It's self-exclusion. It doesn't have any value for me. I don't want to burn down Zen temples. It just doesn't have any value for me. So I'm really happy about these conversations because I think what's arising, these things that are arising, has enormous value. I think people do watch this, and I think people do learn. Not just it's not about learning about Ray or learning about NVCa, but people are learning about this topic, and I think that's profound because there's not a lot of oxygen for this, you know. Somehow, you know, Edwin's calls went from 40 people being interested in Extinction Rebellion principles to, you know, 3 people being interested in the NVC group. And that doesn't necessarily reflect on the importance of this conversation. It might be actually flipped. You know, there were times in the 80s where you couldn't get 3 people together to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And now, I mean, it's huge. There's huge campus groups that work on it. So I have a lot of trust that this topic has value.
So you've been in the same situation like Edwin's, the question Edwin's posing, whether to how to engage with the fact that you're kicked out and there's no, there seems to be no dialogue possible, and you reacted so far by speaking with people who are open to speaking, discussing, exploring it with you, and also by watching or trying to integrate to understand what's happening in this group, to learn more about the group. And what you found in with respect to the NVC ABC groups, it's maybe, or also to the Zen Buddhists, you don't see so great value of you being allowed to go there. You think about self-excluding and you do that with Zen, but you see enormous value in thinking about exclusion because it's so happening, it's so omnipresent, and it gets so few attention, so little attention.
Yeah, and I want to end by saying that somehow in my journey around all of this, it never occurred, the idea of doing a fast to the death never occurred to me, and I'm really enjoying just that idea that I just, you know, got from Edwin today. I'm not thinking necessarily it's a good idea, but you know, it's like, oh yeah, that's my limit, and I have my own limits about what I'm willing to do to bring attention to this issue.
So you liked that it was made clear that you have this option, and yet that you don't want to choose it in this case.
Yeah, I feel heard.
Okay, well, great. Excellent. So that was 2 hours, and maybe a good time to end it here. I'll post the video, and it would be nice if they ended up in those groups somehow. I don't know if
I have some ideas behind that. We can brainstorm.
just, yeah.
I can post in the group, and
Okay.
but I'd like to check with admins first if they want that post.
Well, they probably don't, but
I have a quote where Ray said it's okay, so we can use that.
yeah.
I can ask publicly.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah,
And
because the other one had 500 views so far, so.
Last week, this call from last week.
Yeah.
Cool.
So.
One thing which almost led to self-exclusion of me from this call was that you didn't post a list of people who have committed to come, and that's totally fine if as many people as they want can come, like in the usual empathy cafe. But if I reserve this 2-hour block in my day and I'm not even sure if I can participate, that's really a bit putting what was a bit
Yeah, it
harsh
was
for me.
only James had signed up, and so I just at the very, yesterday I just said anyone that wants to come can come. So instead of trying to schedule it, so we can see about next week too. If we do this, so well, I find it very helpful, very interesting. I appreciate everyone taking part, and I'll stop the recording.